The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody, welcome to this session from Source to Synthesis. We will be starting in just a few moments. Please hang tight. Give you a brief introduction to the session, apologies. Please note that the session is being recorded. So Ocean Acidification Week, as you may be aware, is presented by 4 sponsoring organizations. First, GOA-ON, the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. Second, NOAA, the United Nations National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Third, the IAEA OAICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And last but not least, the IOC UNESCO, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. For those of you who are new to GOA-ON, it is a collaborative international network designed to address 3 high-level goals. The first goal is to improve our understanding of global ocean acidification conditions. The second goal is to improve our understanding of ecosystem response to OA. The third goal is to acquire and exchange data and knowledge necessary to optimize modeling for OA and its impacts. GOA-ON was established in 2012 with just a handful of members. Since then, GOA-ON has grown immensely. It now has over 900 members from 105 countries. You can join GOA-ON today by visiting goaon.org. GOA-ON also consists of 8 regional hubs which span across continents and oceanographic regions. We'll be hearing from most of them throughout OA Week. The Northeast Atlantic hub is next up today. GOA-ON is an active organization that offers numerous resources to its members. GOA-ON informs policy at the international level and is involved with the initiatives such as the Commonwealth Blue Charter and the Community of Ocean Action on Ocean Acidification. Specifically, GOA-ON supports the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14, Life Below Water. GOA-ON has helped tremendously to develop the methodology for SDG Indicator 14.3.1, providing guidance on how to measure ocean acidity and how to report this collected information. The data collected informs local and regional governments and UN climate programs, which is why this session today is so important. GOA-ON also holds a data portal which provides access and visualization to OA data and data synthesis products that are collected from around the world and from a wide range of sources spanning from cruises to moorings. We welcome all scientists to submit their OA observations to the portal. It's quick, easy, and it allows greater visibility for your work. Additionally, GOA-ON offers members scientific mentorships, scholarships, and hands-on training through the peer-to-peer program. If you're interested in joining the program as a mentor or a mentee, please visit our website and sign up. GOA-ON's newest resource is a webinar series, which was established following last year's OA Week. We welcome your input, and if you have any topics that you would like to see discussed or that you would like to present, please let us know. You can send an email to secretariat@goaon.org. Over the next 10 years, GOA-ON intends to go even further. GOA-ON has become involved with the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development, which will run from 2021 to 2030. This Ocean Decade will provide a common framework to ensure that ocean science can fully support countries to achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. GOA-ON is very proud to announce that our proposal, known as OARS, Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, was recently endorsed as an official UN Decade program, and we can hear more about that this afternoon. I invite you to join the session. The OARS program will build on GOA-ON's existing work to further develop OA science by enhancing capacity efforts, increasing observations of ocean chemistry changes, identifying the impacts on marine ecosystems, and providing decision makers with the necessary information for mitigating and adapting to OA. GOA-ON would also like to draw your attention to the 5th International Symposium in a High CO2 World. This conference was initially scheduled for September 2020, and like many other events over the last 18 months has been postponed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The symposium is now scheduled for 2020, and we hope to see you all there. With this, I would like to introduce the speakers for today's session. We have a moderator for this session, which is Dr. Helen Findlay from the PML Marine Lab in the UK, and she will introduce the panelists to you in a minute. So Helen, if you'd like to join us. Hello.
Hi, welcome everybody, and thank you, Katherina, for that introduction to GOA-ON and the OA Week. So this session, as Katherina has said, is called From Source to Synthesis, Improving Flow of Ocean Carbon Data. As data generating scientists, we find it that we need to find suitable data archives that are coherent with our legal obligations of funders and that make it practical for access and visibility. So in addition to that, we actually also need to think about where the data is going and what products and reports are useful and in order to achieve the greatest impact. And I think that's ever more increasingly so because of things like the United Nations SDGs and the commitments that countries are making to kind of showcase impact from our science and actually make those data accessible. The ocean acidification data landscape is incredibly complex, and this is highlighted in this slide that you can see on your screens now, hopefully, which is work from the Northeast Atlantic Oceanification Hub Data Working Group. And I just wanted to put this up here to highlight the complexity of getting your data through from collection up to some of these synthesis reports. So it's a complex mix of data repositories with varying audiences, purposes, meta, and data requirements, as well as quality classifications and control mechanisms. And that all means that it's incredibly difficult to actually work out where we can store data, where's the best place for it to actually become seen and see yourself. So key to facilitating better data flow is communication among data producers, data managers, and data users. And this session here is another attempt at bringing together more discussion on how we can actually improve community data flows to get the best solutions. Next slide, please, Katherina. So one thing that we have put out, you may have seen already, is a survey just to establish what sort of data people are generating, where they currently archive it. And this just helps us with when we're thinking about producing and improving our data archives and infrastructure, where people are going and understand the challenges associated. So if you haven't already been able to take part in that survey, we'd really appreciate if you could. It's actually based on one that we did in the Northeast Atlantic Hub. So if you've already done it as part of that hub, then feel free to just click on the link, and there's a comment there that says you've already done it. It says yes, and that just means that we can register that another kind of, we can link those two surveys together. I think the link for that survey should be going up in the chat at some point in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So just to kind of highlight that, one of the questions that we asked in the survey, as you'll see if you complete it, is what infrastructures you submit your data to. And it was really interesting to find just within the Northeast Atlantic Hub that at least 2 people are submitting, people are submitting to at least 2 different archives and data centers. And there was some people that were submitting up to 5 different places. And that seems like an incredible misuse of time and resources, really. So one of the things we want to try and do is really see if we can improve that flow between data centers and from scientists into the infrastructures. Next slide, please. So we're going to do this by having a discussion session. We're going to first hear from Benjamin Pfeil from the University of Bergen, the Bergen Data Center, and then following that from Kirsten Isensee from the IOC about the SDG portal. And they're going to talk very briefly about the current flows of data from scientists into those different infrastructures. And then we're going to open up the discussion to the floor. We're going to do this using the chat or Q&A feature that we have in GoToMeetings, but we've also got Jamboards where we're hoping that people will be able to put up their comments to these 3 questions that we're going to look at. So what are the current obstacles and challenges? Who should be taking part and how can we improve flow? And then thinking about data products. So we'll come back to those in a minute when we go through the Jamboard sessions, but hopefully that will really allow us to provide good community input and feedback. So I think at this point I'll hand over to Benjamin Pfeil to give us a quick run through of how data flows to SOCAT and GOA-ON. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for the introduction. Now I simply have to find how to share my screen. 1 second. Can you give me the presenter's rights?
That should have worked.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes, I hope that worked. Typical question, can everybody see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Perfect, thank you. I want to show the example for data flow within the scientific-driven carbon data synthesis, mainly SOCAT, the Surface Ocean Carbon Dioxide Atlas, and GLODAP, the Global Ocean Data Analysis Project. And I work at the Bergen Climate Data Center at the University of Bergen, and I'm involved in the research infrastructure ICOS Integrated Carbon Observation System. The main part why things are being done in our community is the data value chain. We want to go from so-called often long-tail data that is not really the main big data in this case, that this data is gathered from the various scientists around the world and observation systems, then goes into data products, SOCAT and GLODAP, then is being used by higher entities for various purposes, and then the end data goes into GCOS. So the main aim of this, the main aim for the data flow is that, or the one part is that we have a typical bottom-up approach. It means the scientists identify that there's a need for global, coherent, consistent, and homogeneous data synthesis. The metadata meets often the needs for reusability of the final data product, and the established data flow does not follow official national routines. This is optimized for the scientific purpose. The scientists are experts for QC and perform QC, and none of this is actually centrally funded, but work is performed by informal global networks that are, of course, coordinated, but they're not into global entities where everything is funded on a long-term basis. And the QC is most of the time being done by the networks on a voluntary basis. Those data syntheses can be quite successful. They have been going on for a long time. SOCAT just filled 10 years, but it often bypasses to some extent established systems due to the that it's not centrally funded, and that's more done by informal global networks. I'm going to show you the typical example for the data flow within SOCAT. The scientists or domain-specific data managers submit data to a dashboard. That means it's an online part where people can upload the data. We have some sanity checking, some metadata checkings. The data gets we get a preview of the data, then it's being submitted. Then the quality control is being done by scientific experts of several reasons. The QC data is afterwards being made available on a yearly basis in synthesis products and as a publication. The final data product is archived at NOAA NCI, and afterwards data experts reformat the data to various needs. It was actually interesting to see Helen's slide about the data flow, that actually much more is being done in the background, but quite often this is not being visible for the scientists involved. So we actually change data to the GOA-ON portal, to Copernicus, to EMODnet, and soon to the SDG 14.3 portal as well. And most of those parts are being done by reformatting or by using ERDAP. The data flow for GLODAP is slightly similar, but to some extent different. That means the scientists or domain-specific data managers have quite close dialogues with data managers, for example, at CCHDO or NOAA NCI OCADs. And then the data is being integrated and get an initial QC by certain people. For example, it was it was Bob Key, now it's Nico Lange, that are doing the reformatting of the data, doing an initial QC. Then the data is handed over to the global group. They do QC and adjustments, and then the data is being finalized and shared with other colleagues and being published on a yearly basis as well. And then the same, that the data is being then shared with other entities or other groups like the GOA-ON portal, Copernicus, EMODnet, and soon the SDG 14.3 portal. And that was more or less my introduction to the data flow. Thank you.
Helen, shall I start?
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm going now to the next example, and this is a data flow to. I'm sorry. To the SDG 14.3.1 portal towards a federated data system for ocean acidification data. Benjamin already briefly mentioned it, but just to give a tiny bit of background why we have that. So we have as Benjamin said, there's now as well more an official request for ocean acidification data, and this is via the 2030 agenda, which has 17 goals, and we have goal 14, which reads conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas and marine resources for sustainable development. Under that, there are 10 targets, and target 14.3, as you probably all know, addresses to minimize and address the impacts of ocean acidification, including to enhance scientific cooperation at all levels. This is a nice target, but how to actually measure progress towards that? The United Nations agreed on an indicator, which is average marine acidity pH measured at agreed suite of representative sampling stations. That is, of course, a short indicator, but needed some definitions and, of course, a methodology behind. Where GOA-ON was really a key partner. The scientists helped us a lot to develop this methodology describing what to measure, and also again very nice to see Helen's slide. Actually, we accept much more than just discrete samples. Also, that includes underway, and it also includes mooring samples. It's just that ideally, of course, to have ocean acidification, we need more than just one parameter of the carbonate system. We would need two parameters. However, especially for SOCAD or whatsoever, there are in parallel also additional measurements are taken, which might be discrete or whatsoever, to then really get that information on ocean acidification and not only surface CO2. However, those is then not used in the SOCAD. So right now, what we have for the SDG 14.3.1 indicator data collection, and we as IOC are responsible for that as we are the custodian agency. In theory, all United Nations countries signed up to report on that on a regular basis. IOC for that really follows 3 different paths. One is by the IOC national representatives, one by the NODC's ADUs, and the individual scientists. And why do we use this? Those different pathways is because capacity for ocean data at the administrative level of different nations is very limited. For example, IOC national representatives just literally don't know where to look for this data. Then sometimes NODCs exist, but they don't have the data. Or if NODCs exist and have data, sometimes the data are not complete, or metadata are not complete or insufficient. And then, of course, there's the individual scientists, and when they contribute, and some of you go to already contribute, we still have to go back to the IOC national representatives. That's always an extra step, because this is then a national, it becomes a national submission. And why should actually scientists contribute? This really increase the use of the information obtained by the scientists at a more political level, and hopefully also a benefit for them, and then increases the visibility to the and also the communication, hopefully between the scientists and some of the policymakers and stakeholders, and allows, at least in the future, this is what we envision, more easy for global and regional comparisons. And also the communication of what we kind of hope will also increase is really what we are working on to improve the communication between data managers, the scientist data managers, and some policymakers and stakeholders. For that, we established in late 2018, for the first time, the 14.3.1 data portal. And this currently fulfills basic functions related to the collection, really very specific for 14.3.1. You can upload data and metadata in Excel format directly to the portal. You can also fill the metadata information in there. You have drop-down functions there to really make all that a little bit easier for you. There you can include several data sets per metadata file. You can check data automatically to ensure the files were correctly uploaded and prepared. You can verify the location, and you can search for data sets submitted and also download them. You can see those available data sets on the map, and to actually help the submission and also downloading, there's also a FAQ page which we try to update on a regular basis, giving especially after the first year's collection, we updated that quite a bit to with lessons learned. However, we now really, as I said, we want to go towards a federated system, because currently a number of national and international projects and databases also collect and host data relevant for the SDG 14.3.1 reporting. We want to avoid duplication of efforts, and we know that as Helen had this wonderful graphic which really illustrates there's so many different platforms where people have to submit data already, and they're anyhow obliged to submit data to a data archive, and to then allow that to be used as well for 14.3.1 reporting. we are trying to establish a federated system to automatically harvest data from these other relevant databases on a regular basis. With the development of the federated system, the 14.3.1 portal would become one of the platforms to be harvested on a regular basis and could act as a mirror to support visualization and exchange and ensure long-term availability of the data. However, of course, as we are building this federated system, and which is kind of in the middle of all those others, we hope then as well, it also allows then the other databases to benefit from, for example, SOCA to benefit easier from CDataNet and EMODNet and us and national databases, and the same would be then for us. So it's really a win-win, we hope, for everybody. Of course, there are a few steps to be taken, and we started those steps. We secured some technical support because that's definitely not an easy task. We also did the first steps to agree on a vocabulary and agreement on minimum metadata and data. There we have the kind of a commitment from a lot of the databases to work with us on that and to establish such a ERDAP system helping this federated system. And then we will also, of course, hope improve the SDG 14.3.1 data portal and especially the interface to allow uploading as well of data in different formats, not only Excel, which is sometimes not the most used one. So we really hope that this data flow as well from the scientists to 14.3.1 will be facilitated, and at the same time we are working with those other databases that data flow is improved, and that we then really in the soon future will also have it easier for the national focal points to agree on those data sets, and so that they are actually aware of what is happening in their countries. However, there are already some good news, and in 2019 we only had 8 countries submitting information to the 14.3.1 reporting, and in 2020 it was already 30. And this is also really thanks to the capacity training done by GOA-ON and partners. We support that also a lot from IOC, who train on the 14.3.1, who give the technical and human capacity to newcomers. And now we also want to really, I think, make it beneficial for already established ocean acidification observations in the world. And I stop here.
Thank you, Kirsten and Benjamin. That was great to hear the overviews of those data flows. So I think if you and Benjamin keep your videos on, then we can kind of try and move to the discussion section. We're going to, as I said earlier, we're going to try and use Jamboard. So we do have the question answer box. Just quickly, we have a question, Kirsten, from Libby. Will the automatic harvest of data into SDG portal go live for this data call for SDG? We'll just ask that now while we're still.
So we are working on it. It really depends on how fast that goes with the individual databases. For example, for NOAA, we will most probably start now with the BODC and SOCAT and GLODAP, ICOS. That might be some of the first steps. And then this might be not yet in place. It always depends on the how much is already established as well on the other side in terms of how much knowledge is there as well, to because it's also a commitment from the different databases to actually work with us on that on the server, on the ERDAP server. So we are closely working with your colleagues at NOAA, and we hope that we can do that maybe even in parallel. I had a very productive workshop just last week, and it seems all going in the right direction. So yes, maybe Benjamin, you want to say something on that? Or?
I think you get a pretty good summary. The main part is for especially the automated services to allow interoperability. It requests that data inventories have a structured data inventory, and quite often some archives, they simply archive data as it was submitted by the scientists, and then it would be difficult to harvest those data machine to machine. So we are working on it, but it will be difficult in some cases.
Yeah, especially on very old data sets. That's definitely something which was also highlighted. But we will make this process on the other database side as easy as possible. Within this technical support we secured, we will kind of give a step-by-step guide on how to do that on their side. So that's something to really make it as easy for all the arms in that federated system.
Thanks, both of you, for that. So you can use the questions box to write questions, and also raise your hand, and we can unmute people once you've raised your hands if you want to raise a question. But we're also going to use Jamboard. So for anyone that hasn't used Jamboard, what we'll do in a minute is just share a screen of one of the first Jamboard. So we've got these questions posed here. What are the current obstacle challenges with respect to oceanification data flow in your region, your field of research? So what you can do in Jamboard, if you've never used it before, is click on the left-hand side of your screen, if I get my left and rights correct, and you can create post-it notes, I think, which is the one, the sticky notes, that one, and you can click on that, and that will bring up a sticky note where you can put a note and then just put save, and it comes up on the Jamboard itself. So if you go, once the link is in the chat, which will be put in shortly, then everyone should be able to click on the link, open up Jamboard, and start writing nice comments. And hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion around some of those comments as they come up. But as we say, we welcome people to put their hands up and ask questions directly as well. So let's see if we're just working on getting the Jamboard. There we go. There comes the Jamboard link, and so we should still start being able to do that. So yeah, I mean, for me as a scientist, I can pose a challenge. I mean, for me it's about, if I submit to my oceanographic data center, one of the main challenges then is that they don't communicate with the SDG or IOC at the moment, and I have to resubmit my data in different formats. So it's getting that metadata, I think, set out correctly, and really kind of aligned, I guess, so that it doesn't, it's much easier for me to just do it once. And then if I need to submit twice, it's just a case of copying and pasting and sending that same email. So if there's ways that we can align metadata across those infrastructures, then brilliant. That would be great.
Yeah, that is really the main objective now, really, of this effort as well. And there are a lot of those initiatives, for example, in Europe already underway, but we also need it at the global level, and hopefully we can be a little bit a boost there as well from IOC, bringing those different platforms together to help that, which is then really of advantage for everybody. It would really be great if if people want to put something in the Jamboard. If not, maybe it's a little bit a challenge, or give us.
Yeah, Helen, I mean, that is one of the main parts, that we try to have an alignment that people submit once. They submit to either the NODC, that the data goes into the SDGs, to SDG 14.3, or that they submit to SOCAT, and then it's being submitted to the, feeding back to the NODCs and to SDG 14.3 portal, and the same for other data synthesis. At the moment, the data flow was unfortunately not established, since the communities were not very much aligned. Now we have the unique chance that we can actually have aligned initiatives, and we have, under the SDG 14.3, we have a global mandate where all countries have responsibilities, and I think that's a big chance for our scientific communities, but for the data management communities as well, to have aligned efforts.
I see as well that the variables needed on the Jamboard, and indeed there is a minimum set of required metadata. And if you talk about variables for ocean acidification to describe it, we would need, of course, definitely the 2 parameters of the CO2 system: temperature, salinity, depth, location. And if we have that, then we are already in a very good place. For 14.3.1, I mean, we also have those different data qualities. And if you have a look at the methodology, it's also really there's this quality of non-existing quality, and so that at least everybody can be featured, that we know there is a start to be made to measure ocean acidification. Everybody gets a credit, and this is also what we want to hopefully make easier here now, to give credit to the data originator. Yes, time constraints, reformatting data takes a long time. This is what we want to avoid in the future, that you have to reformat 3,000 times.
But this is actually true for not just OA data. That actually shows that we don't really have an established workflow for data management, that actually normally local data stewards, data managers could assist the scientists to do the reformatting on that level. And the initiatives going on a higher level that should assign or help scientists on that level. And I think if we overcome this issue, much more data would actually finally flow into the data archives as well.
Variables need, yeah, so those variables needed, some databases need a lot and others not. So at the end, as Helen said, a double formatting. Yes, and again, this is something because the products are different. And this is another question we will pose later. Depending on the products, it also depends what kind of variables you need. Or metadata. I mean, also the difference, I think, between variables and metadata. So even that depends very much on the.
And normally would like to have enriched metadata as well. What kind of system was used, how it was calibrated. And it's an ongoing progress to inform other communities as well that this is actually one of the most important metadata, and able to reuse the data for other scientists. And this is more an ongoing dialogue, and we're trying to solve that one by basically through the SDG 14.3 using Ocean Teacher, for example, to inform the data managers, the NODCs, ADUs, in order what needs to be reported and what kind of metadata.
Yeah, then again on the who's responsible for data submissions. In theory, it's a country for us, but it's different for SOCAT and GLODAP. There it's a scientist. So how However, countries don't have those data, or NODCs quite often don't have ocean acidification data. So nobody is, it's a scientist who should feel responsible to submit. And then we would make sure that the country knows here's a great data set from this scientist.
May I answer another question about version control? The version control is actually results that we have double submission. The data is often submitted to various data archives at various stages of quality control, and data is not really merged at one point where you can really see what kind of QC has been performed by different entities. This becomes extremely complicated when data, for example, is archived at national oceanographic data centers and then, for example, used by the scientific community, and they perform QC, for example, for GLODAP, that this information or quality control often does not feed back to the national archives. And it is something we hope to improve in the future. And it's one of the main obstacles for users nowadays. And having this interoperable system where we basically make sure that data is exchanged machine to machine can actually reduce the amount of versions, and we can at least control them to some extent, because we would like that people submit once and then the data is being used at various entities.
Yeah, then knowing whose QC's data. There's a primary QC, and that I know is quite often very different in different places and so on. But there is actually a IOCCP-led activity on that as well to improve that, to help that. As Benjamin said, there will be soon an OTGA course as well. And then there hopefully will be some good resources which will help. For the secondary quality control for 14.3.1, this was very limited at this stage. We never really changed anything. We went back and to the data submitter then individually. That is definitely something where we then, if we have a higher amount of data and go to, that will be a next step on establishing their more automated process. Shall I then, yeah?
Can I just make a quick remark towards SOCAT and just the surface PCO2 data? Yes, that's one of the issues that we have identified, that other underway data is not being quality controlled and not integrated at this point. We hope to generate funding at one point to include it, but at the current point, it cannot be integrated since SOCAT is a voluntary effort, and we made a pitch under the Decade program to improve that one. Thank you.
Yes. And before we then maybe, I don't know, Helen, jump to the next one. How does IOC let countries know what data has been submitted? We write to them. We write them in a message and say, here's the data set from your country.
Well, on that note, shall we move to Jamboard 2? And we will start a little bit of discussion around that, which is really about who else should we be involving in these sort of data flow discussions? How can we improve the flow? I mean, we've heard from Benjamin and Kirsten some of the solutions that are being put in place, but if there's any other suggestions for that and any other comments really surrounding that, that would be great to hear about. Again, just to remind people, you can raise your hands if you want to comment directly rather than use the Jamboard, and there is the Q&A as well. So I don't know what the audience list is at the moment, whether most people on here are scientists or there's a few other stakeholders, I guess is the word. But yeah, I don't know. Benjamin and Kirsten, do you have any thoughts or feelings on how we should be taking this forward with further discussions. Obviously, there's discussions going on in the background that scientists maybe we don't necessarily hear about. For example, Kirsten, your discussions with NOAA and with Benjamin on SOCAT and GLODAP. So as a science community, we don't necessarily hear about those inner workings of what's going on behind the scenes. So it may be a quick opportunity, if no one's got any comments straight away, to kind of just reiterate or highlight some of those activities.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, therefore, for example, what we also did, and we from IOC are always very happy, like we did for the UK or Northeast Atlantic Hub, to have rather specific regional, because it's also different in different regions, how some of those data flows and where people contribute to other databases in the Northeast Atlantic. People already submit data to so many different databases and just are a little tired of submitting to a new one, and others it's a little bit different. So I think having that more often together, the scientists together with the data scientists, so the data provider with the data managers, it's of high importance. But then I think that's also on one of our tasks. We have to then take on a little bit more to get the third party in there, the country representatives, so that they are also aware of what's going on in the background and that it's not so easy. And then even statistical offices of those countries, which are a next layer we haven't even addressed yet so much. But that's definitely something.
From my side, one thing to add on that one. Ever since SDG 14.3 became a national contribution, there have been many meetings lined up, basically how to improve the data flow. That we had people, for example, from European networks like CData Cloud and EmoteNet. Then we had colleagues from the US, from NOAA, NCI, OCATS. Then people from research infrastructures like I work with. Basically, they have been trying to set up and try to basically ensure that we have a good data flow. And this one is actually guided as well through the IODE network under IOC UNESCO. So the aim is basically to integrate it at the highest level possible for national oceanographic data centers and associated data units that they aim to control the data flow. But one thing that should be improved is basically the outreach to the scientists, because for certain data, there was a good community approach from the scientific community to its data centers. And we are basically facing data that has been not really operational to some extent, the data flow. And the data flow is often stops at one point where the scientific community gets access to the data. And then the data is they have some scientific communities in certain countries have very good dialogue to certain international data centers or national data centers, and maybe not the best data flow towards the national data centers. And that can be as well that everybody's under funding restrictions and nobody has the capacity. Now it's a time to build up the capacity and the dialogue and to do the collaboration.
Yeah, and just on that, I think really getting those different databases as well. This is what we are already doing, but I think this is a continuous dialogue as well to get those different NODCs all on board who at least have the capacity to do something like that already. Because the CO2 community is relatively young, but they were very active, and there are a lot of different pathways to use the data and to create products, and therefore also databases. So it's really that, yeah. And the link to the funding agencies, this is a little bit what, at least for the national ones, because those the national representatives to IOC are quite often in governmental agencies who fund those things. But I think at the European level, for example, having their more direct communication as well with the European Commission wouldn't be bad. And as well in other areas with those regional funding mechanisms And I think that's also a very good point.
One more remark towards the funding agencies. What is really should be mentioned as well, that many of the observing stations measuring related to SDG 14.3 are under extreme stress to generate and maintain their stations. And I think that's something that should be highlighted on the highest possible level as well, that their national contributions, and the national contributions are to support the stations to actually deliver the high quality data that's needed in order to fulfill the obligation.
Absolutely, I think that's a really useful point, and for any scientists that are running long-term time series, it's a really important point to make sure that their data is visible, and that the country knows that they are their one and potentially the one and only station in the country that's submitting that data on their behalf. So incredibly important. Can either of you pick up on sort of new sensors where you see kind of some of these new autonomous maybe pH sensors fitting in? Some of those, obviously we've got the PCO2 with SOCAT, but where pH sensors are coming more online, whether there's any where you see those fitting, just briefly, and then we'll move on to the final comment.
This is actually a perfect example. It's just like, of course, when you measure your pH sensors, and especially those new ones a little bit, which might be better than some of the CO2 sensors, easier to handle and more applicable. I think that will be a great asset to the 14.3.1 if there are also some parallel measurements of other carbonate chemistry parameters. I mean, not leaving it to pH alone. It's this is what we really try to incorporate in the methodology, that ocean acidification doesn't mean pH.
Okay, we'll move quickly on because we're going to run out shortly of time. Just briefly, if anyone has any thoughts on data products, what they would see as those of interest to you. For example, what sort of, as a scientist or a data user, what sort of products are useful or of interest? Either ones that you know about or would like to see in the future. We'll potentially keep this pretty brief because we're running out of time. But yeah, from my perspective, again, as a sort of scientist, it's really, I find it very frustrating if I'm asked to kind of to gather data from that's not my own, to kind of look at regional data or try and get data out of our national data center, and it's just been submitted from one individual and doesn't come with all the associated data that I need. So it would be nice to have a sort of universal product that you can very easily get an understanding of what's been done. Uncertainties have just come up. I see someone's data products with realistic uncertainties, and that kind of thing. So it's asking for this one-stop shop really of everything, but I think just tightening up metadata between different institutes would really, really help being able to kind of draw down that data again whenever you want products out of it.
Yeah, this is exactly, I mean, the product, I mean, I have different ideas for products, for example, for 14.3.1, really, that we have a map where we can see the different stations very easily, where we can see what kind of measurements they're doing and for how long, and some average values for or some variability and average values and uncertainties on those stations when they have more than 5 or 10 years. I think we can be very, but it's exactly that what we try to do there. Is this discoverable ocean acidification data of known quality, and we get ocean acidification data, individual data sets, which are with individual metadata sets, and then it's very difficult to identify the quality and the uncertainty. Yes, and of course we all want data trends from around the world. And I think we want also those data sets visible together to really identify those vulnerabilities. I mean, that would be like a major objective to get those vulnerabilities in.
Just for the data products, I think if we start to include uncertainties, it would be a very good way how to include the different networks. We have the monitoring communities to some extent that observe, then we have scientific networks, and then maybe want a higher quality because they need it for their scientific purposes. But it would be a unique chance to integrate certain data that we can, for example, say the data from GOA-ON would be the high quality reference data, then other data could be integrated. And I think we would move more towards the vision of a global ocean observing system that's actually interconnected and integrated. And I think that would be one of the keys in the future. At the moment, we kind of tell the users to go to GOA-ON, we tell them to go to EMODnet, we tell them to go to SOCAT for various data, but I think we should have it more user-friendly, that they can actually access all of that data at one single point with uncertainties. And I think under the given framework currently, under the Agenda 2030, there's a unique chance to make this one happen.
Yeah, and those minimum data sets that at least 14.3.1 minimum metadata are the same everywhere. And then if your favorite pet is SOCAT, then you can put those additional metadata they have as minimum metadata as well. But we have that as kind of the minimum set.
I think that would be ideal, but we're going to run out of time. So all of the points here are captured. If you have any other additional questions, you can put them into Twitter using OA Week 2021 as a hashtag tagging @GOA-ON. And we'll continue the conversation on the OA Information Exchange as well. So please do not feel that this conversation has to end here. We welcome additional discussions, and hopefully we can use, as Benjamin just said, highlighted, that we can really use this unique opportunity that we have with the UN Decade and also the SDG 14.3.1 to really bring this together. So just like to say thank you to Benjamin and Kirsten, and also to people behind the scenes, the Secretariat, Katherina, and Mike and Trevor. And thank you all for joining. And a reminder that the Northeast Atlantic session is happening later on this afternoon. So please all sign up for that as well. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.